Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sacred Stories. It is such a treat to have Dr. Rebecca Ray with us all the way from Australia. Thank you for being with us, Beck. It's really,
I'm
really a pleasure.
so excited to be here. Please
Yeah,
excuse my Australian accent. That's what I bring to the
we
conversation.
love the Australian accent. We love it. It's perfect. It's perfect. I heard a quote the other day that stories last longer than nations. And was thinking about more than geopolitics. It's really our hearts and our courage and the way that we touch lives that truly live on. And so I'm just really looking forward to diving into your sacred story today. I want to bring us into sacred space, and we're recording this the day after the election results were announced in the US. And so I am sharing a quote by Kamala Harris, who said, "Our unity is our strength and diversity is our power." Our unity is our strength and diversity is our power. And so as we come into sacred space together today, I invite us to connect with the sense of oneness, the sense of wholeness, the sense of connection that our planet is so eager to help us realize and to step more fully into, to connect with the wholeness that we hold inside of each of our hearts, and the ways we can connect more deeply to others. And to remember that in listening to others' stories, we hear our own, and that there's so much beauty that connects us. And my blessing for us today is that this time is one of deep connection and resonance and some laughter and humor too. So may it
Best
be.
ingredient.
Yes, yes. So Beck and I work, I heard you on Aaliyah Lovely's podcast, Spiritual Shit. Aaliyah was on this one before. And, the way that you embody radical courage and elevating fulfillment and freedom is also resonant. But what really, really stood out to me, Beck, was just like your realness and your authenticity and your humor. And yeah, your energy was just golden. And I reached out totally blindly, and here we are. So yeah, I'm really excited to dive in today.
Me too. I'm so
Yeah,
glad that the internet exists so
I
that
know,
we
right?
can reach people on the other side of the planet.
Yeah.
Because although we might be tiny in the big scheme of the universe, I really think that for me, my work is about this. It's about being able to contribute meaningfully in some way to the world, and you never know who your words reach. And the blessing in the work that I do is when people let me know that my words reach them. And so when you offered the invitation to come on, that I think embodies for me the um, not the reason. I don't do this to be recognized. I do this, like you say, to connect with people who get where I'm coming from with all of this.
Yes, yes, yes. Will you share just a little bit about, I usually have guests introduce themselves. So however you want to introduce yourself, whatever feels perfect in this moment.
The the way I want to introduce myself is by how I show up first, and that's as a human. So we tend to introduce ourselves with all the socially accepted constructs
Yeah.
about what make us us,
Yeah.
in the eyes of Western society in particular.
Mhm.
But I'd like to start with the fact that I'm a human, and that means that I am deeply, completely imperfect. Um, and so everything that I talk about today comes with that caveat that I'm just here trying to live bravely and meaningfully alongside you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But alongside that, I am a clinical psychologist and a speaker and an author. And those roles feed into my work and they shape what I do. But my roles as mother and wife shape who I am.
Yeah. 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 I'm just continually struck with Walt Whitman's words, who said, "We contain multitudes." And when I think about the people who I most admire, like that were able to hold deep wisdom and deep authenticity and playfulness and vulnerability and razor sharp intelligence, like we're able to make sacred space for all of that. And so, yes, 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 those are the people who I want to hang out with. With you. So I'm going to invite you to share a sacred story that's shaped your life, and we'll see where that takes us.
So, the sacred story I want to share, because I think it resonates for us as two humans, perhaps having a mirrored experience, is the fact that I had a plan for my life when I was young, and my life looks nothing like that today. Absolutely nothing like it. So, when I was at school, I decided I wanted to be a psychologist. That part is still consistent. I did go on to become a psychologist,
Yeah.
and I still am, in that I'm still registered as a psychologist. But I also thought when I was at school that I would grow up to marry my husband and perhaps have 2.4 children. I thought that until I was about 10, and then I decided I wasn't going to have children at all. But I still thought I would meet my husband and we would get married, and that I would go on to run a successful psychology practice and essentially have an SUV parked in the driveway and just, like I literally, if you take the, if you
It's
just
so
take an ad,
emblematic, like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you just take an ad for life insurance out of your local magazine.
Right.
The
Right.
picture was what was in my young head
Yep.
about how my life would look.
Yep.
And instead, I'm sitting here as someone who ditched psychology to go and become a pilot, and then ditched aviation to come back to psychology, and then had multiple failed relationships with men who just, I think I think a lot of it was actually my issue with my lack of self-worth. So I accepted things in relationships that otherwise I would never accept now, because of where I'm at in terms of how I see myself and how I approach the world. And just, age is a wonderful thing. I'm a big fan of aging.
I love aging too. I feel
Yes,
like I just keep getting better and better. Yeah.
absolutely. I agree. And so what happened was my 20s were kind of, fulfilled with, not fulfilled, but filled with dissatisfying relationships with men, only because I didn't meet any man that could step up, I think, and meet me emotionally and mentally, in the way that I needed to be met. But I also think part of that was about not knowing myself deeply. And then at about the age of 33, I decided that I was going to be single for the rest of my life. So, considering I didn't decide that as in that's not what I wanted, but because I was still single at the age of 30, and that seemed to be a massive blight on my life
Aging.
timeline.
Right.
Yes, yes. Um, I thought, well, if this is it, then I'm just going to go off and start ticking off my bucket list. I'm just going to create a great life, or the best life that I can live by myself. And so the first thing on my bucket list was Africa. And I went to Africa a couple of times by myself. And then I came back, and the next thing on my bucket list was that I decided that I would go back and learn piano. I learned piano for a couple of years as a kid, but my parents let me quit when it got too hard. And I, as an adult, have always really been disappointed that I quit learning piano. And so I rang the local music school and said that I needed an appointment or lesson on a Saturday morning, because that was the only day I didn't work. And I was assigned my piano teacher, who was Nyssa. And she taught me piano at 9:30, excuse me, at 9:30 on Saturday mornings for about 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And during this time, I became progressively more obsessed with her. And I couldn't really understand why, because she's just like a piano teacher. Like, really, what's the problem?
Right.
And then I heard her sing. So she invited me to a gig of hers. She's a professional musician. I heard her sing. And I was like, whoa, something's going on here. Something's going on here that I couldn't really understand and couldn't really make sense of. And she asked me out, and I thought that she was asking me to hang out with her. Like, this is how, like, I don't know. I don't know how to do relationships, and I didn't know at this point. And I also didn't know that she identified as gay,
Right.
or lesbian, whatever you want to call it. And from that date onwards, she just never left. She never left my life. She never left my house. And within about a month, I was like, oh, this is how love is supposed to be. And I say this, I think it's important to note, I say this as someone who does not identify as a lesbian. I don't identify as anything. I just happened to fall in love with a woman who happened to be the most incredible person I've ever met, and also the best fit I've ever seen in another human being for me.
For you. Yeah.
And so it wasn't without its bumps. I went into therapy to accept the fact that I'd fallen in love with a woman.
Yeah.
Being a psychologist, I'm a big fan of therapy from both sides of the couch.
Good.
And I was at risk of sabotaging our relationship because it didn't look the way I thought my life should or would look. And so I did some therapy, and then I kind of got more comfortable with it, and I got more comfortable with other people not necessarily being all that comfortable with it or having to take time to get used to it. And I just realized that, I think life, or at least in my case, life had brought me something that was more incredible than I could ever have imagined for myself, if only I'd let myself have it.
Yeah.
So the conflict was within me. The conflict was within me to allow myself. This thing could just be so damn good if I would let myself have it.
Yeah.
And so I did. And then once I found my feet in this love, I realized that life held all of these possibilities that I'd never thought about before, or not after the age of 10 anyway.
Can I ask a question
sorry.
back? So
Yeah.
the feelings that come up that are like the fear of actually having what we dream about, or the overwhelm that it could be this good. What was that? Like, what was that triggering in you? What was it inviting you to shift or heal in your own life so that you would be able to receive Nyssa's love and to be in a beautiful relationship with her?
I think I had to, what's the word that I want? I had to rejig. That is not the word, but something like that. I had to reframe what relationships were in my head. I'm still surrounded, other than one relationship that I can think of, I'm still surrounded by women in dissatisfying relationships with men. Oh, and, same-sex relationships as well, because I treated many different relationships when I was in practice. But in the people that are closest to me, I'm still surrounded by women who are in dissatisfying relationships with men, or relationships that they have largely settled for and just accepted or tolerated because of, it's just easier to be in a couple financially or practically or whatever it is. And so I think for me, what happened was, firstly, I needed to accept that my life wasn't going to look the way I thought it was. So, right down to wedding photos were not going to look the way I thought they were, And this was not conscious. I had to bring this up from my unconscious to understand that I actually had a very clear picture about how those things would look. And those things apparently mattered to me. I didn't know they mattered, but apparently they did when they were confronted to be something different. And then secondly, it was about understanding that I was worthy of a love like Nyssa gives. Nyssa is she's just ridiculous in the way that she loves. Like she is, the best word that I can use is, because we're in, if we use our kind of lexicon of today,
Yeah.
she's unproblematic. She is so unproblematic that I was like, how come this is easy? Like for a time, I tried to create or, unconsciously sabotage our relationship because every relationship I'd had prior to this had been hard,
Right.
or required work. And Nyssa is so unproblematic and she loves so cleanly. There is no baggage to
Yeah.
her love.
Yeah.
And she literally loves me no matter how I look, or if I write books and don't wash my hair or brush my teeth during that, a couple of days when I get deeply in the writing process.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to be loved. So that was a real turning point to understand that I didn't know how to receive unproblematic love.
Yeah.
And she taught me how to, by just not leaving. She just doesn't leave. I don't want her to leave. Pretty good thing that she doesn't leave. But, my baggage initially that could have forced her to leave or, triggered her to leave,
Yeah.
she just didn't leave. She gave me the space to be all of me without turning away. And in the past, I've experienced being too much for someone, or someone not being able to meet my emotions with an unguarded heart or an unguarded perspective, and just allowing it to be what it was without making it mean something about me being less than.
Right. Right.
And so that's what she brought to my world. And from that place, when you're loved in that way, there are a whole series of possibilities that show up that weren't present in my world prior to that.
Oh, I love that, Beck. And I'll say too, one of I had a really strong download after a breakup several years ago. That was, if I can love this person for exactly who they are, then I can do the same for myself.
Yeah.
How powerful. So yeah, I love that. I love that. Wow. Um, hmm. What would you say now? How long have you been together now? How long has it been since you first met?
What's the date? 9th. So in 3 weeks, we've been together for 8 years.
Well, happy almost anniversary.
Thank you.
Or what would you say if I mean, I love nothing more than a good love story of two women. And I'm actually I was thinking as you were talking, like, I don't think I've ever shared my coming out story publicly, although it was similar. I was 30 and I had been totally boy crazy my whole life. Although I definitely had moments at this all girls summer camp that I went to where I was like, they were like crushes on the older camp counselors. It wasn't like consciously sexual, but I thought they were so cool and I got all kind of flutter around them. And then I befriended someone and she had been with women before, and I started to totally develop a crush on her. And I was like, wow, this is not what I was expecting. But it was very similar to you, like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be like. It just felt more true and deep and real and safe and honest than anything I had ever experienced before. And
safe is such an important word. Nyssa brought the experience of emotional safety to my life. And I was like, whoa, like mind blown, especially for a psychologist who has talked a lot about emotional safety to clients who didn't experience emotional safety. But my relationships had never been for long periods of time. And so, and in my relationships with men that did go, longer than a couple of years, they were boring, like I honestly felt like they were boring. And then once I started to reframe emotional safety as something that is priceless, invaluable for just life itself, to have somewhere you can go. I don't care whether the relationship's intimate or whether it's a friendship or whatever it is, but if you have somewhere you can go, and that relationship is characterized by emotional safety, it is priceless. And I don't think I had completely experienced that before Nyssa.
What do you think that she did in order to be able to offer that? Like, had she done a lot of work on herself in order to get to that place, or was it more innate, or a little of both, in order to
It's an
show up
interesting
that way?
question. No to the work on herself. So I think meeting me was possibly a bit challenging because I'm always looking to grow and to find out the reasons behind why I do the things that I do. So I think I kind of introduced her to that way of being.
Yeah.
But I think she was not a traumatized individual. So she didn't come with trauma in her background.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that emotional safety is not possible with someone who's been traumatized. I'm just saying that she just entered our relationship, certainly having had her heart broken in the past,
Yeah.
but not as someone who had not been loved, well in the past. She had been loved by parents and friends, and and I just think the difference was that she brought a willingness to our relationship to know all of me. But even before she knew all of me, she was completely accepting of all of me.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I just think that's so amazing. It's so amazing to show up to someone and say, bring it on. Bring it on. I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
Bring it on. But I've seen enough of you to know that my heart needs your heart.
Yeah. It's so, I'm like, I have chills. It's so brave. It's so fiercely strong, but it's also so like soft and open and tender. It really, I feel like it just holds both of those really beautifully.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So yeah, I love that. Do you think it's something that can be taught to people who want to be able to love that way?
Yes, because I think you can teach someone how to have a better relationship with themselves.
Hmm.
So I think if you teach someone what it's like to show up authentically in the world and what it's like to honor your boundaries, what it's like to honor what's really important to you and what kind of contribution you want to make to the world, all that kind of, this is me and this is what I have to give to the world. If you teach someone to fully accept themselves, as fully as we ever can, like
Right.
again, this is with the caveat of being imperfect at this myself, I think that bodes really well for being able to share in an authentic relationship that's characterized by honesty and safety. To be able to be honest in a relationship, you need to be able to be honest with yourself to begin with. So, but I will say that my self-worth was, I wouldn't say healed. That's not the word that I want. It was definitely strengthened by being in a relationship that has as its very foundation emotional safety.
Yeah. 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 It's a both and, right? Like what we
Yeah.
ourselves and then what the other person offers also.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. Um, I want to pivot us a little bit, if that's okay,
Sure.
and talk about kind of, you know, as we sit here now and think about how spirit or your heart is calling to you now, what you shared before we started recording was that you're being called to trust and have patience and work in a way that is sustainable and meaningful rather than anything that looks like hustle, which I love.
Mm.
And I'd love to hear you share a little bit more about that. And then I have some questions too.
Sure. Um, this probably goes to one of the possibilities that Nyssa brought into my life was, should we have a baby? And um, the reason we tried to have a baby was just because we decided we should say we tried. So we kind of spoke to our 80-year-old selves,
Yeah, yeah.
and thought, would we regret not trying? So I honestly thought that we would just try, and that would be as far as it would go. And we would then go off and live very free lives and
Right.
just say, we tried, we ticked the box. Okay, we tried.
Surprise!
Yes. But surprise, on the
Yeah.
last try, we got Bennett. And I almost grieve for life without him, and the fact that I almost missed out on him. And the only thing that makes me feel better is I would never have known what I know now. You can't know what you don't know, and so we would have had an amazing life without him. But to know being his mother is the greatest joy of my life. And so what that means for someone who runs a business and writes books and runs a podcast and no longer is in private practice because I got burnt out and therefore doesn't have a stable income, what that means is there's a lot of pulling here and there, There's a lot of how on earth am I going to make sure that my bills are paid this week? Or at least there was at the beginning of my business. And there sometimes still is, because business goes up and down depending on what you can offer it. And so I constantly have to come back to my life lessons of trust and patience. I don't trust automatically. I lean on the side of pessimism. I'm largely a realist, but I lean on the side of pessimism. It's just the way I'm made. And it's also got to do with, having a traumatized brain that I carry with me and will carry with me for the rest of my life. And the impact of that is that sometimes I can lean towards the negative and expect that things won't necessarily work out. Couple that with the fact that I have a PhD in impatience. I am the most impatient person you will ever meet in the history of the world.
I don't know what that could possibly look like.
Yeah.
What?
It's not an attractive quality in a partner. And so here I am being pessimistic, but also impatient for things to finally work out. So I constantly have to come back to this trust and patience that it will all work out. And that means trusting that being able to let my energy unfold in the way that I have it in these days when I'm 41 right now. And I don't have the energy that I had when I was doing my doctorate in my early 20s. I don't have the energy that I had before I was pregnant and not carrying pregnancy weight still. And I don't have the energy that I used to have when I didn't have a child that needed me on a daily basis. And so what that means is the way I show up in the world is inherently different because my resources are distributed differently in various areas of my life. And so I walk this line. You talk about multitudes and holding space for all these different truths. My truths are that I am proudly anti-hustle. For me, I do not want to model in my business for my students, for my followers, for anyone watching what I do. I'd never want to promote the idea that you need to work 24/7 or at least all your waking hours in order to be successful in business.
Yeah.
But I also hold space for the truth that sometimes, like when I'm pushing up against a book deadline, as I was in October, I have to work long days. And that means that I'm not always available for the family and I miss out on swimming lessons and things like that because I have a book deadline. So there is times where it actually goes to the point where I have to get okay with creative ebbs and flows, energy ebbs and flows, productivity ebbs and flows, but still say that I am absolutely anti-hustle. But that doesn't always mean that you're going to see me lying in a hammock every afternoon, It means that some days I just have to do what I'm contracted to do because I signed on the dotted line and promised my publisher a book. So, it's this interesting it's this interesting life lesson that I'm sure that I will always face, because I don't wake up every morning going, oh, you know what? I think this is all going to work out. I don't. Nyssa does that.
Yeah.
Nyssa wakes up with a smile on her face. And I'm like, who are you? Like, who does that? Like, what's wrong with you? And she's the one that goes, I think everything's going to work out. And when you get exposed to that enough, you start to be able to practice that way of being. But it still is a conscious practice for me.
Yeah.
And it's a conscious practice for me to go, it's okay for it to unfold in its own time and not in my time, because nothing happens on my time, because everything would have happened yesterday.
Already. Yeah. Well, I have so many thoughts. So one is like, to me, just the radical self-kindness that we can offer ourselves when we say, actually, I'm going to honor my own energy and just our body's natural ebbs and flows. You and I are the same age, so I noticed too, like, certainly more wisdom, but yeah, my energy's just different. Like, I'm not able to go the way I was. But I'm also thinking too, we have a lot of small business owners who listen, and people who are doing creative things with their life. And I'm thinking about kind of one of the things I've been wrestling a lot with. I don't love like structure and timelines, and feeling like I really rebel against it. It's why I'm working for myself, because I love the freedom and expansiveness that comes from creating my own schedule. And yet at the same time, as a business grows, like, there's so many buckets or balls that we're juggling at the same time. There's like nurturing our current community, and then broadening, like trying to reach more people, creating content, social media, like offering programs, and then just taking care of adulting and, our own lives. And so I guess I'm interested to hear you talk a little bit more about like ease and flow and honoring that, but also like living in the physical world, and kind of how you discern like the balance between the two, and growing a successful business, but also like not wanting to be in the hustle, and what that looks like.
Yeah, I think I've got a perfect example for that, because it just happened to me last month.
Love it. Okay.
So in September, speaking of doing all the things,
Yeah.
I have an assistant, and she's a godsend. And this was one of the biggest things that I really learned in business, is that you can't do all the things. And for as long as you try to do all the things yourself, you'll always hit a ceiling of productivity, a ceiling of results, a ceiling of people that you can impact, et cetera, et cetera. And so I have an assistant, and I have a couple of other people that do things for me as well. But my assistant is largely the one that sits alongside me. And we had this discussion about, there comes a time in a calendar year, when if you're going to try something out, like a new course, then you should probably get it out. The last time you can probably release it is probably October or November, particularly if it's new, and particularly if you just want December to be some reflection time, which is what we were thinking. So I have a mastermind that I'm so incredibly excited about, called Intentional Business. And I got so excited about it that I was like, yeah, sure, we can launch it in October, and it will run for October and November. And then we can take what works from it and relaunch it next year. So basically our beta testing was going to happen this year, but I had promised October to myself. I had promised October to myself because it was the deadline for my book, the biggest book that I've ever written, the longest book, not biggest, but longest book. And so I had to then work out how that was going to look. What happened was I launched Intentional Business publicly, because I thought I could do it.
Yeah.
I thought I could do both.
Yeah.
And about 3 days after I launched it publicly, so we launched it to my list, we launched it on socials. I talked about it in stories. I think about 3 days afterwards, I started to feel sick.
Yeah.
So the moment I launched it, I was like, And then I thought to myself, oh, harden up. Like, you're just being soft.
Yeah.
This needs to be done in these months. And then we can launch, what we learn from it this time next year. So just harden up. You just got to do both. You should have started writing earlier if this is a problem. This is the type of self-talk I had. But come day 3, when I was still feeling sick about it and thought, I'm contracted to write a book. No one is contracting me to run a mastermind, but I'm contracted to write a book.
Yeah.
I need to honor the fact that I had promised myself this time, and I need this time if I'm going to give 150%. And one of the things that is part of my values and how I show up is, if I'm here, if I tell you I can be here, it's because I know I can give you 100%, 150%, all of me. And that's why you had to wait a while for us to even have this conversation, because it was scheduled so that I could be here completely with you. And that's how I run my calendar. And once I realized I couldn't do both the intentional business mastermind and my book, I had to pull it. And so publicly, I pressed pause on everything, much to my assistant's kind of unease. She was like, but we've got all the content ready to go. I had podcast episodes ready to go. I had newsletters ready to go. And I said, no, we need to stop, because I don't want to be promoting stuff on social media. In fact, I'm going to step back from socials as well, and I'm going to do nothing but write. Yeah. And what that meant was also holding space for a drop in income, because my brand is my face.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so my brand is my face, and whenever I'm not present, then, people don't necessarily know. And you don't get the reach that you normally get if you're present all the time. And so I accepted a drop in income in order to be able to give 150% to my book, knowing full well that I'd come back around and be back with my community as soon as I can. But that meant that there is this duality of, hold on a second, I have a business, I have a team, I have bills that I need to pay, and I have a community that is used to seeing me and hopefully benefits positively from seeing me, to help them meet their goals, run their businesses, do what they're creating to contribute to the world. But at this time, if I want to retain my sanity, then I need to stop. And so that's what I did. I did it publicly. And what that allowed me to do was to get back in integrity with myself.
Yes.
And I got back in integrity with my community, including people who had signed up for the mastermind in that 3 days and were very excited about it. I had to say, I can't. I will, but not now, because it's just not going to work right now.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's been one of those things where I think what age has taught me is, it doesn't matter what my bank account looks like, because what's most valuable is that I can say that I contributed in a way that gave all of me.
Oh.
Not just doing what I want to do for the sake of the income. I don't do anything for the sake of the income. For those of you that are not aware of how the publishing industry works these days, unless you're Liz Gilbert or Brene Brown or someone like that, you don't get paid stacks and stacks of money to write books. And so I certainly don't show up just for the money. I show up to make a difference and to contribute with what I know might be able to help. But that also means that the way I show up is just as important. It's just as important as what I give you when I show up.
That was so invaluable. My next question, Beck, was going to be like, what is the self-talk that you do if voices ever come in that say, but what about the money? And
when they do.
Yeah, I feel like you kind of answered it, but I'd love to hear a little bit more if you're willing. Like, when you make the decision to pull the course and to take care of your own sweet body and show up for your family in the way that you want to and all that, like, how do you respond to the fear that comes in about finances?
And there absolutely is. Scarcity is a very real part of my world when those types of things happen, and I realize that I just can't do all the things. I've done a lot of work on money mindset, and one of the things that really works for me is to constantly practice not so much an affirmation. I guess it is, but I don't love the word affirmation, because for me, that implies that we can just say something over and over again and then all of a sudden believe it. And I just think that's bullshit. Like, honestly, in the clinical work that I've done, if I assigned homework for someone that was feeling depressed to just go and stand in front of the mirror and say, I am worthy, I am worthy, I would have been slapped across the face like so many times, and understandably so. But what I do practice is saying to myself, there is always money. There will always be more money. And I also look at the past and go, show me a time where you didn't pay your bills.
Yeah.
Oh, that time hasn't happened. Right. And yes, sometimes I've borrowed money to pay my bills. So sometimes it hasn't come from me.
Right.
Sometimes I've asked for help, particularly at the beginning of COVID, because things changed for us quite dramatically with Nyssa not being able to gig. But then what happens in my head is these things that I think are really important. The people who need what I'm creating will come. As long as I show up, the people that need my voice in the way that I do things, I'm not doing anything brand new. I'm not recreating the wheel. What I have to say is very likely not original. But what is original is the way I say it and what I bring to that particular topic or type of work that I offer people. And that will reach the audience it needs to reach in its own time, as long as I keep showing up. And so this is coming back to the trust that we talked about. And and I think there are times where I've woken up and gone, oh my goodness, like all I'm doing is writing my book. Like literally no one has seen my head in quite a long time. And the other part of my self-talk says, but you know what? Who's dying? You know, like what is actually going wrong here? And there has never been a time where I've taken a break that's actually turned out negatively for me online. If anything, all it's done is given me this sense of, oh, social media is not the world, you know, like it's actually find it really freeing to step back from social media, and I plan to do more of it. But what I remind myself of is that it's not the end. Like things don't just fall apart because you don't post on Instagram for a month, you know? I mean, yes, we need to be present. And yes, the algorithm works from the fact that we post regularly. But by the same token, I think it's really important to acknowledge the fact that we're still human in all of this. And if someone becomes my student, I want them to know that I'm telling them the truth. I want them to know that I am being transparent. Especially because when I first started selling courses online, I used to listen to podcasts with people saying, oh, I made 6 figures in my first launch. And I believed it. And then I started launching courses. And even though I have a big following and, you know, I have an audience, I did not make 6 figures in my first launch. And I had to start understanding that people often tell the story that suits them at the time if they don't value transparency and honesty. And so as I coach people, entrepreneurs mainly in business and how they show up, I want them to always know that I'm telling them the full story. And that includes the fact that it costs money to do this stuff. It costs money to run an online business, and it costs time and it costs energy. And I'm never going to show up and say, look at me, I'm making all this money and I'm lying in a hammock while I do it. No, it's not true, and it's not consistent. And I don't want people to think that, because it sets up expectations for them when they then go and put out their offerings to the world that are unrealistic. And while I totally believe that the more money we all have, then the better things we can do in the world, I truly believe that. And I truly will never, ever apologize for wanting more money. And striving to make more money, because I want my students to have that experience as well, because when good people make great money, they do great things, right? And so I think that the process of getting there, though, is always a process. It always unfolds in a way that won't necessarily fit what you just heard on that person's podcast, where they were claiming to have these amazing results but never told you how much it cost them in Facebook ads to get that result, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And we'll link to your podcast, but you're so wonderful at being real about that. I mean, I remember listening to several of your episodes where you like really talked about the numbers and broke it down. And a lot of people talk about charging like astronomical amounts and knowing that you're worth it and all that stuff, but then you actually need people who are willing to, and want to pay that, which is, especially right now with the way the world is, it's not the case. So yeah, I so appreciate that transparency. I was thinking too, as you were talking about kind of fear and the voices of fear that come in, especially around money, is that fear is just so in the future. And so if we can remind ourselves just to get, it's mindfulness, right? Like to get present with what is. I'm not impoverished at this moment. Like that can be like a reassuring touchstone a little bit too.
Yeah, I love that you brought that in, because I often use gratitude for that
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah.
But again, being a naturally pessimistic person, I don't automatically bring gratitude as part of my daily experience. It's a conscious practice,
Yeah.
because instead I can get swept up in scarcity. But what gratitude does is it pulls you out of scarcity and brings you back into the present moment to say, hold on a second, you have a roof over your head. At the moment, I have a liquid amber tree in the front of my yard, which is probably at least, I imagine, 60 years old. And it branches out and it's deciduous. So, it loses its leaves with the seasons. And it really... it's the first time I've ever had a tree so close that's deciduous to show me the passage of life.
Yeah.
And for me, even little things like being able to look at that tree is a gratitude practice for me. It helps me to come back to my values rather than attaching my worth to my results. Instead, because we're naturally human beings and like to measure stuff, I attach it to, am I living by my values? And that means, am I doing something meaningful today? Am I contributing in some kind of meaningful way to someone else? And what do I have to be grateful for already based on all the work that I've ever done, rather than looking at my bank account and going, oh, that's not where I think it should be. To come back to, but what is? And at the end of the day, I know that I'm not going to sit on my bed when I'm like 80, or if I'm lucky enough to get to that age, and go, check out my bank balance, like
Right.
check me out.
So true.
Yeah,
So
I'm not. I'm going to go,
yeah.
I loved, and we created this little being, and some people in the world liked what I said and what I wrote, and it made a difference to their lives. That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah. That invitation to come back to our values when we see our monkey mind starting to spin out is a really good one. Like, yeah, am I living the way that I want to be living? And if yes, then okay, there isn't quite as much in the bank account. And like I am in soul integrity right now, and that counts for a lot. So big.
And what's coming into the bank account will come. Like I don't want to say and give the impression that I'm giving our listeners this idea that it's like this impoverished existence if you want to run a business that you love, because I don't think that's the case either. I just think it's about understanding that growing a business takes time, and the teething problems of having enough cash flow to pay bills at the same time when you first start out, and finding an audience and finding your voice and all those types of things, that takes time. But I do think absolutely money is important, but I think it's understanding the flow of things as well. There's a flow of money, there's a flow of energy, there's this exchange, this universal exchange, where if you can trust that you're in the right place, it will come to you as well. That doesn't mean sit there and manifest it. It means take action, because I'm also not a fan of this idea that you can just sit in your lounge room and manifest your dreams.
Your vision board.
Manifesting
And voila.
is, yeah, we need action.
Yeah. Yeah. I love what you're saying. There's a Jewish theologian named Mordechai Kaplan who describes the divine as process, which to me like speaks so richly to what you're saying. Like
it hits the nail on the head.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all unfolding. I'm wondering, because I know you work with entrepreneurs around money, but also around, dancing with our how we show up bravely and our
Mm,
fears and how we speak to them. If there was someone who is kind of more in the stage of growing their business, they weren't like fully financially sustainable yet, but they realized that they were doing a lot of work that didn't light them up, like things that someone else could do, for instance, like admin or whatnot. Um, how would you invite them to think about whether or not to pay someone else to do stuff, even though they weren't financially sustainable yet, versus like just do it themselves? Like I'm thinking about, wanting to kind of stay in that groove of my values, ease and flow, but also like the realities of the admin that just come with the business and making decisions about how and where to spend money. Do you have thoughts about framing that for us?
yeah, I do. I In the work that I've done, the coaching that I've had for myself, one of the things that's always been really helpful for me is being asked the question, are you doing what a CEO would do?
Hmm.
Because I want to be the visionary in my business, the CEO in my business. I'm not interested in being the person that sets up the campaign for my newsletter and makes sure that the people in this funnel don't go in this. Like honestly, that makes me want to stick myself in the eye with a pen. And so when I think about the tasks on a daily basis that I could do,
Mhm.
because I'm capable, I've got those skills, versus what I should do, I come back to, well, what would a CEO be doing in this instance? And um, that's when I think of outsourcing to be able to stay in my zone of genius. And my zone of genius is not in the details. Yes, I'm actually very detail minded. Like you can show me a page and I'll pick the spelling mistake really quickly. And it bothers me if my pink is not E2AC. It's a kind of color quite like it. No, it needs to be E2AC. Thank you very much. Those types of things really bother me. And they're also in my skill set, but they're not necessarily where the best use of my energy should be going in order to be able to do income producing things. So I try to stay in the zone of content creation or product creation because that's where my zone of genius is. I can answer the questions that my audience ask. And so if I'm not doing something that allows them to get some time, that also means that when you're starting out, you need to stop and go, but what happens if I can't afford it?
Right.
The first thing that I would say is to outsource the thing that you absolutely hate
Mhm.
first, because, and for me, that's bookkeeping. I absolutely hate it. Like I just loathe it. It's
Yeah.
just not, no, no, just no. So many no's. Don't make me go near it. Don't make me think about it.
Yeah.
And so I pay someone so that I never have to think about it. It's just done for me. And all I need to do is supply the statements.
Mm.
That the energy that it would take me monthly to deal with that emotionally
Yeah.
is worth what I pay tenfold, you know?
Yes.
And so get rid of that thing first. Get rid of the thing that is draining you from allowing you to do what your business is actually needing you to do to stay as the person that is offering the world what you've got to offer. The second thing is if you find yourself hitting a ceiling, if you find yourself hitting a ceiling in productivity because you're doing all the things in your business rather than working on your business, then it's time to hire. And
Yeah.
sometimes that means borrowing money in order to be able to level up that next section, to then be able to have that ceiling removed. And when I say borrowing money, I don't necessarily mean going to the bank. I mean, what someone I saw speak calls burn all the boats. So
Mm.
he and his wife were starting a new business, and whenever they start a new business that they fully believe in, they will actually what he calls burn the boats, which means sell everything they have to sell to
Mm.
throw into this business.
Oh, I
And
see. Uh-huh.
yeah, Nyssa and we've sold a piano, we've sold stuff that was sitting in our shed that we never used. We've sold a whole series of things, mainly instruments of hers that she no longer
Sure,
plays or
sure.
she's upgraded
Yeah.
in order to be able to put into the business so we could do something else next.
Mm.
And I really believe in that process. Unless you've got an amazing idea and cash flow starts coming at you initially, in which case the decision's a little easier. If you've got cash flow, then I really think you need to think about what are you doing that's taking you away from your zone of genius on a daily basis. Those are the things that someone else should be doing for you. But the caveat for that is finding that person. So
Mhm.
I think it's important to always remind people that you won't necessarily find your team first go.
Yeah.
And I hire on a values basis. So I have business values that largely reflect my human values, but business values, and I hire people based on their fit for my values. I also let go of people based on their fit for my values.
Yeah. Oh, so helpful. And I'm just thinking that this doesn't only apply to people who have small businesses, but also just the way we live our lives. Like, let me step back and think about how can I stay more in my zone of genius or more in like the truth of my heart? How can I show up more that way in life? And the things that I notice that feel really draining, is there a way for me to let them go or outsource them, things like that? So
Or
yeah,
just accept that you won't be good at them. Like cooking. I suck at cooking. Suck. I could cook if I
right.
followed a recipe. I
Yeah,
could, but I choose not to
yeah,
because I
yeah,
hate it.
yeah.
And so there was part of me that actually grieved not being this Stepford housewife, like not being the mum that I'm not going to be the mum that makes those lunch boxes that are Instagrammable, right? That's never going to happen for me. And there's part of me that was really sad that
Oh,
Bennett wouldn't get a mum
yeah.
who is like, come on, come home for a roast. And I've just made all these amazing things for you in the kitchen. Like, that's not going to be me. And I think part of my growth and evolution has been accepting what I am and what I'm not. And I think sometimes the acceptance around what we're not is the most powerful, the most freeing. Because once you finally accept it, you can finally celebrate what you are instead.
Oh, so much. Yes. I think about that like professionally, you know, in every arena, in relationship, professionally, as a parent. Yes. Yeah. Oh, I love it. Um, I want to bring us full circle a little bit as we kind of close this container and ask you, when you connect with your 80-year-old self, what does she tell you?
She tells me, well, first of all, there's two things. One, she repeats what my nan said to me a couple of months before my nan died. So I was sitting with my nan, who was married to my pop for 69 years, and we were sitting together the day after my pop died. My nan died about 3 months later. And my nan was crying, and she's a very stoic woman. And that was only the second time I'd seen her cry in my life. And she said to me, darling, in the end, all that matters is who we love and how we love them. And my nan was not a poetic woman. She was not a woman of words. She was a woman of sewing, and she grew up on a farm, very, very capable woman. She was the cook. I never got her
Yeah,
skills, but
yeah.
I miss her cooking every day. So my 80-year-old self repeats that all the time to keep me grounded about what's important. But my 80-year-old self also says to me, damn girl, look at the life you created. Like, seriously? Can you believe that you are living this life? Not only do you live across the road and you can see cows, so cows are I'm going to have a cow. In fact, I should share with the listeners the truth. One day I'm going to have 2 miniature Highland cows, a miniature donkey, and a sheep. Just so we're clear about what's going to happen in my
Yeah.
life, this is what's
You
to
have
come.
their names picked out, Beck? Do you know what the
I picked the sheep's name. Her name's going to be Gloria, but I don't know about the
I should
cows.
say, Robert?
Yeah, I'm going to have a sheep called Gloria. and I'm going to bottle feed her from a lamb. So I'm going to rescue her. If there's a rescue organization, I'm going to make sure that it's a lamb that lost its mum or is in a situation that needs rescuing. And I'm going to bottle feed her so she follows me around the yard. But anyway, she'll be inside during that period as well.
Yes.
I've got to prep the dogs for that. But this is also what she says. Before I get to having my little miniature farm, she says, look at your life. How lucky are you? How lucky are you to do work on a daily basis that doesn't feel like work at all? You work on your own terms. I do not have a boss. Yes, I have to answer to my publisher, but I don't have a boss on a daily basis. I am my own boss. I am loved for who I am with every stretch mark and every kind of day that I don't put on makeup and just like roll around the couch because I'm too tired to do anything else. And out of that love has come a little human who's 2.5 who just like rocks my world every single day. And I think that from that alone, if I was ever going to say what is success, I would say it looks like this, because each day I get to show up and live a life that I'm in love with. That doesn't mean I don't have pain. I absolutely do. I'm a feeling person, so I feel all the things, but my 80-year-old self, particularly my impatient and untrusting times, would say, hold on a second, you need to stop and take a breath, because not only are you doing it, but you've done it. You don't have anything else to prove.
I just felt that in my whole being. Oh, so beautiful. Say one more time what your Nan said. Say that line again, just for us.
She said, darling, in the end, all that matters is who we love and how we love them. Yeah. And she said that through tears while she was eating Vegemite toast and looking out the window of her nursing home in a room that was next door to my pop's in the 24 hours after he was no longer there. And she had the presence of mind to be able to pull that when I sat there and held her hand and we cried together. That's what she said to me. She didn't say, don't get married, because you know what? If you're married for nearly 70 years, it bloody hurts when the other person dies. And I can't deal with this pain. And it's too much. She didn't say that. She didn't say, oh, you know, your pop and I, we had some really hard times, and sometimes he could be a real bugger. And I know that's the truth. She didn't say that. She said that that's what matters, who we love and how we love them. And I'll never forget it. If I was ever going to have a tattoo, I'm not. That's not on my future list. It would be that.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing her words with us. It's really
my pleasure. I think she'd like to know that she lived on through those words.
So much. Yeah, so much. Wow. Thank you. Thank you for just your open-hearted sharing and your realness and your wisdom and your stories. They've been really, really special.
I'm so glad. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah. Will you share how people can get in touch with you and also what your offerings are right now and all that good stuff?
Absolutely. You can find me at rebeccaray.com.au. You can get a whole heap of free stuff at rebeccaray.com.au/free. That's FREE. My current offerings are my course on radical courage and overcoming self-sabotage. And we're just about to prep to transfer everything to be entrepreneurial related. So I'm actually re-recording those courses for entrepreneurs directly and intentional business. The mastermind will be out in January.
Oh my gosh.
But you can also find me. Sorry.
I'm really excited for that. That sounds phenomenal. Sounds so
me
good.
too. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I'm so excited that I want to do it myself. I think it's going to be that good. But you can also find me in bookshops or good bookshops. If my books aren't there, then the bookshop is not good. And you can find my books online as well. And I'm on all the socials as at Dr. Rebecca Ray.
And Beck has some really, really beautiful Instagram posts. So be sure to follow her there. They're really
Thank you.
great. Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for this conversation. I want to just close us out with a sacred invitation to connect with our 80-year-old self. I usually connect with my 85-year-old self. I'm like
Hmm.
going even a little bit older.
Yeah.
And to be able to tap into the perspective, the wisdom, the open hearted permission to really live the life that we want to be living, and to get crystal clear on our values and what lights us up and what feels most important, and to hold that as our sacred touchstone as we move forward. And to know in those moments when we feel more human, or we hit upon the sticky stuff, or it's just a hot mess of a day, that it's all part of the journey, and we can like lovingly and gently and tenderly come back to the wisdom of our 80 or 85-year-old self to kind of
Yes.
bring us back home. Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Jessica.
Yeah, such a treat.